Why people follow dangerous leaders. Most people like to believe they would recognize a dangerous leader immediately. They imagine the warning signs would be obvious: the aggressive speeches, the enemies, the promises, the obsession with loyalty. From a distance, history often looks simple. We look back and wonder how ordinary people could have supported leaders who divided societies, destroyed institutions, or led entire nations into catastrophe. But the uncomfortable truth is that dangerous leaders rarely begin by looking dangerous to the people who follow them. They begin by looking necessary. They appear at moments when people feel abandoned, humiliated, or afraid of the future. They offer an explanation for the confusion, a target for the anger, and a feeling that someone finally understands what everyone else has ignored. And that is why this subject matters. Because the question is not only why people in the past followed dangerous leaders. The more important question is why human beings, in almost every generation, remain vulnerable to the same pattern. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel. Here, we explore the hidden psychology behind power, manipulation, fear, and human behavior, not as simple facts, but as stories that explain why people do what they do. The real reason people follow dangerous leaders is not simply ignorance. It is that dangerous leaders know how to transform private anxiety into collective purpose. When life is stable, people can tolerate complexity. They can accept that problems have many causes, that solutions take time, and that no single person can fix everything. But when life becomes uncertain, complexity starts to feel unbearable. A failing economy, social disorder, national humiliation, cultural change, unemployment, war, or even the feeling that one's status is slipping away can create a psychological hunger for clarity. People do not only want answers, they want emotional relief. A dangerous leader provides that relief by reducing a complicated world into a simple story. The story usually has 3 parts. First, something precious has been stolen from you. Second, a specific enemy is responsible. Third, only this leader has the courage to restore what was lost. This kind of message works because it gives people something more powerful than information. It gives them meaning. Their frustration is no longer random. Their fear is no longer private. Their anger becomes part of a larger mission. And once anger becomes a mission, it becomes much harder to question. This is why dangerous leadership is not only a political phenomenon. The same psychology can appear inside a company, a religious movement, an online community, a family, or even a friendship group. Wherever one person convinces others that loyalty matters more than truth, the pattern begins. The leader does not need followers to understand everything. In fact, it often helps if they do not. What matters is that they feel understood. A person who feels invisible can become deeply attached to anyone who makes them feel seen. A person who feels powerless can become loyal to anyone who makes them feel strong. A person who feels ashamed can become devoted to anyone who tells them their suffering is not their fault. This is where the danger begins. Because the leader is no longer judged only by what he does. He is judged by what he represents. To followers, he may represent revenge against people they resent. He may represent protection from a world they fear. He may represent pride after years of humiliation. He may represent order in a society that feels chaotic. Once that emotional bond forms, facts become less effective. A scandal can be dismissed as an attack. A lie can be described as strategy. A failure can be blamed on enemies. Even cruelty can be justified as strength. This is not because every follower is unintelligent. It is because identity is stronger than evidence. When people attach their identity to a leader, admitting the leader is dangerous can feel like admitting that they themselves were foolish, immoral, or manipulated. For many people, that admission is too painful, so they protect the belief instead. This is known in psychology as a form of cognitive dissonance. When reality conflicts with a belief we are emotionally invested in, the mind often tries to reduce the discomfort by changing the interpretation of reality rather than changing the belief. That is why people sometimes defend a leader more aggressively after he does something wrong. The more obvious the contradiction becomes, the more energy they need to spend explaining it away. A dangerous leader understands this instinctively. He makes leaving psychologically expensive. He tells followers that outsiders are corrupt, critics are traitors, experts are dishonest, and anyone who questions the movement has been brainwashed. Over time, the followers' world becomes smaller. Doubt no longer feels like thinking. It feels like betrayal. And when doubt becomes betrayal, obedience becomes easier. This is one of the most important mechanisms behind dangerous leadership: isolation from alternative explanations. The leader does not have to control every thought. He only has to make followers distrust every source that might challenge him. Once that happens, the leader becomes the main interpreter of reality. If the group succeeds, he deserves credit. If the group fails, enemies are responsible. If people suffer, the suffering is proof that the struggle is real. If outsiders criticize the movement, the criticism becomes evidence that the movement is powerful. It is a closed system. Every event confirms the leader's story. This is why dangerous leaders often repeat simple slogans. A slogan is not designed to explain reality. It is designed to replace thinking during moments of emotion. Short phrases are easy to remember, easy to chant, and easy to repeat inside a crowd. They create the feeling that everyone understands the same truth, even when the truth has never been seriously examined. Crowds intensify this effect. A person alone may hesitate before saying or doing something extreme, but inside a crowd, responsibility becomes diluted. The individual feels carried by the group. The music, symbols, uniforms, chants, and shared emotion create a temporary loss of distance. People begin to feel that if everyone around them agrees, then the belief must be reasonable. This is why dangerous leaders love public displays of loyalty. They are not only performances for the leader, they are psychological machines for the followers. They show each person that they are not alone, and they make disagreement feel abnormal. In that atmosphere, silence becomes powerful. Not everyone in a dangerous movement fully believes. Some people are afraid. Some are opportunists. Some are uncertain but do not want to stand out. Some tell themselves it is better to wait and see. But from the outside, all of this can look like support. And when enough people remain silent, the leader appears stronger than he really is. This is how societies, companies, and communities can slide into dangerous behavior without every person being fully convinced. Total belief is not always necessary. Sometimes all a leader needs is enough fear, enough confusion, and enough silence. The process is usually gradual. A leader begins by mocking opponents. Then he questions their motives. Then he describes them as threats. Then he suggests they do not deserve the same rights, respect, or protection. Each step feels slightly more extreme than the last, but not shocking enough for everyone to resist at once. By the time the danger is obvious, many followers have already defended too many steps to easily turn back. This is the trap of commitment. The more publicly someone has supported a leader, the harder it becomes to admit they were wrong. Their reputation, friendships, status, and self-image may all depend on continuing to believe. So instead of leaving, they reinterpret. They say the leader is misunderstood. They say the media exaggerates. They say harsh actions are necessary. They say the alternative would be worse. And perhaps the most dangerous justification is necessity. Throughout history, people have accepted terrible things when they believed those things were necessary to protect the group. The idea of necessity can turn cruelty into duty, censorship into security, humiliation into discipline, and revenge into justice. This is why dangerous leaders constantly create emergencies. If there is always a crisis, there is never time for careful judgment. If the group is always under attack, then every action can be framed as defense. If the future is always about to collapse, then ordinary moral limits can be suspended. Fear narrows the mind. It makes people more willing to accept authority, more suspicious of outsiders, and more attracted to strong, simple answers. But fear alone does not explain everything. Many people follow dangerous leaders because doing so gives them a sense of importance. The movement tells them they are part of history. Their ordinary life becomes connected to a grand struggle. Their personal resentment becomes political courage. Their loyalty becomes proof of strength. This feeling can be intoxicating. A person who once felt powerless now feels like a defender of something sacred. A person who felt ignored now feels central to a mission. A person who felt confused now feels certain. The leader gives them a role. And for many people, a role is more comforting than freedom. Freedom requires uncertainty. It requires independent thought. It requires the possibility of being wrong. But a dangerous movement removes that burden. It tells people what to believe, who to blame, what to repeat, and where they belong. That is why followers may describe obedience as liberation. They feel free from doubt, free from shame, free from complexity, and free from the loneliness of making their own judgment. But this freedom is an illusion, because slowly, loyalty replaces conscience. The follower no longer asks whether something is true. He asks whether it helps the group. He no longer asks whether an action is moral. He asks whether it hurts the enemy. He no longer asks whether the leader is honest. He asks whether the leader is useful. At that point, the leader has become a weapon. And when people treat a leader as a weapon, they forgive the qualities that would normally alarm them. Aggression becomes strength. Dishonesty becomes cleverness. Cruelty becomes toughness. Lack of empathy becomes discipline. This is how dangerous leaders survive scandals that would destroy ordinary leaders. Their followers are not looking for virtue. They are looking for victory. And victory, once connected to identity, can justify almost anything. The final danger is that this pattern does not belong only to the past. It belongs to human psychology. It can appear wherever people feel afraid, humiliated, ignored, or desperate for belonging. It can appear in nations, workplaces, schools, online communities, and families. It can appear wherever a leader says, "Trust me completely, doubt your own judgment, and see every critic as an enemy." That is why the warning signs matter. A dangerous leader simplifies every problem into one enemy. He demands loyalty over honesty. He treats criticism as betrayal. He keeps followers in a state of fear. He presents himself as the only solution. And he makes people feel morally justified in becoming cruel. The question is not whether we are smarter than people who followed dangerous leaders in the past. That question is too easy. The real question is whether we understand the emotional needs that made those leaders powerful, because the same needs still exist. The need to belong, the need to feel safe, the need to feel important, the need to believe our pain has a clear cause, the need to believe someone strong can remove our uncertainty. A society becomes vulnerable when those needs are ignored. A person becomes vulnerable when those needs are exploited. And the most dangerous leader is not always the one who looks terrifying from the beginning. Sometimes he is the one who arrives when people are tired, angry, and afraid, and offers them a story that feels easier to live with than the truth. So before asking why other people follow dangerous leaders, it may be more useful to ask a quieter question. What kind of fear would make me want certainty more than truth? What kind of group would make me afraid to stand alone? And what kind of promise would make me hand over my judgment